Hello, everyone, and welcome to this interesting broadcast. We hope it will be interesting for you. Joining me are two guests, Pratik Pine and Avian Manmohan Bahadur, and this is what we're talking about. The Indian Air Force celebrates its 89th anniversary. It happens on 8th of October, and ahead of that, it's a bit of a tradition that the Air Chief has his annual press conference. Today was that press conference. There is a new chief in place, and he's spoken interesting things. He's spoken about some very interesting things, especially when it comes to China, increasing its capacity, capability across Eastern Ladakh and across the LAC as far as air power is concerned. He's also spoken about the collusion between China and Pakistan. Just listen in to what he said.
देशी पे सिचुएशन आपको पता है कि फ़िलहाल अभी भी चाइनीज़ एयरफोर्स PLAF की डिप्लॉयमेंट्स अभी भी है 3 एयर बेसिस में अक्रॉस ईस्टर्न लद्दाख। डिसएंगेजमेंट के बारे में बातचीत हो रही है। इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर डेवलपमेंट काफ़ी हद तक बढ़ी हुई है चीन की तरफ से, बट दिस इज़ नॉट गोइंग टू अफेक्ट दी एयर ऑपरेशंस पर से। हमारी तरफ से हमारी पूरी तैयारी है। And our capability building is dependent on what the threat. The collusion between Pakistan and China and interaction between the officials, I suppose this takes place globally between two partner nations. So there is nothing to fear about there. Only issue which concerns us is the dissemination of or information of Western tactics and Western technology which passes hands from Pakistan to China. With respect to a two-front threat, I would say that the threat is always remains in focus for us, and our capability building is dependent on what the threat.
That's the new Air Chief. Avian Bahadur, you've just heard what Air Chief Chaudhari is saying. I want to ask you, when he says, yes, there is capacity building across Eastern Ladakh as far as 3 air bases are concerned, but operationally it won't impact us. What does that mean, sir?
The fact is that when this Eastern Ladakh crisis blew up a year and a half back, we expected it to progress even further, but we saw a tantalizing pause for the last one. We have seen that, and in this last year, the Chinese have gone on a very fast infrastructure development cycle that they are doing of their air bases, of the air defense equipment that they have installed. So the threat to the Chinese was majorly from the Indian Air Force, because the Indian Air Force is an offensive force. It would carry the war to the adversary, and the Chinese had a large gap, and they knew that if they would be struck, it would be by the Indian Air Force. So what they have done is they have strengthened the air defense infrastructure, or they have utilized this time to strengthen that structure with positioning their missiles, their radars, and bringing up the infrastructure on those 3 airfields that the chief talked about. But when he talks about the infrastructure, all those airfields in Tibet, they did not have blast pits where you park your aircraft to save them from air attacks. So those blast pits have come up in a big way. The satellite pictures, which are now available very easily, and they are there on social media, shows the blast pits having come up, their infrastructure in respect to the POL storage and other things having come up. Now, the fact is that their airfields at a higher altitude, and that that's a plus for us, because their aircraft would take off with lesser weight because of the altitude limitations that the altitude places. What the Chinese have done or are doing is, they were being deterred by the offensive posture of the Indian Air Force, which they are trying to now tell us that, listen, we have our air defense elements set up or are being set up, and if you strike us, you will suffer attrition. So they are doing deterrence in this form. So those 3 airfields which are there, and the others also, incidentally, the reporter must have asked questions about the 3 airfields, but there are much more that the Chinese have done. all along the string across the northern frontier. And we need to keep monitoring this because every day things are happening. It's not just the airfields, the roads, and even the PLA support logistic force bases. Because it's going to be a combined effort if it comes to the balloon going up.
In fact, there are helipads that have been constructed all along the LAC. That is what satellite imagery seems to be showing us. Pratik, come in here. The air chief today he was asked a question about Pakistan and China's collusion because there have been multiple reports regarding it. Reports that we haven't been able to confirm or verify, which is why we haven't put it out. He's saying, look, if there are two countries that are friendly with each other, they will obviously collaborate. And if they hold exercises, we hold exercises with friendly countries as well. But our worries, the Indian worry is that Western technology, Western tactics will go into the hands of the Chinese via the Pakistanis.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I'm sure the air chief is privy to information which probably I'm not. So that is a reality. I'm sure there are certain things happening. But let me also tell you something. I would rather be more concerned that there are technologies going from China to Pakistan when it comes to nuclear technologies or ballistic missile systems or cruise missile systems. That's one. Second thing, which is all the more important, is that irrespective of Pakistan, China has for a long time been stealing technology from the West. For example, if you look at that J-20, so-called fifth generation aircraft, or the H-20 bomber, which is a complete replica of the B-2 bombers, many of their transport planes are literally a copy of the American systems. And the Americans, for some curious reasons, in spite of knowing the way these stealing is happening, they have allowed it to happen. So for me, the worry is not about the collaboration, and I'm sure the Air Force chief also did not want to sound alarming. And I'm sure India is very much prepared because there has been massive augmentation both in terms of offensive platforms and air defense platforms in the last 4-5 years. S-400 when it comes to the MRSAM, which has been already been inducted. A lot of things have happened. But Shreya, my real, what I think would be one of the biggest challenges for the air chief would be to make sure that when it comes to capacity augmentation in an attrition-related warfare, he has to make sure that Hindustan Aeronautics deliver the Tejas on time. There has been too much of delay, because if the Tejas is delivered on time, then only the Mark II program will start. Once the MK1A is delivered, then only the AMCA will start. That is one major thing. And once that is done, I don't think Pakistan is an issue. One of the other things that the air chief would have to make sure is that, we have a problem of supply chain of spare parts today. Today, the reason why we are taking the decommissioned Mirage 2000 from France is because once the production line got stopped, you don't have spare parts. So you're taking over the decommissioned fighter planes to actually cannibalize them for spare parts. So one of the major challenges of the Air Force today is to make sure that you have a sustainable spare parts ecosystem within the country, so that tomorrow once you have taken an aircraft and it has been decommissioned or the production line has stopped, you don't need to worry about that. Today, in spite of the fact that Mirage 2000 is a 30 to 40-year-old aircraft, it's still a nightmare for Pakistan. But the challenge for us has been the spare parts. So these are some of the issues. And of course, one thing I would say, there is a huge worry about one thing. You see the number of frequency of the Pakistani drones coming and dropping the narcotics or the arms have gradually come down. But the quantum of payload is going up, which means the kind of drones that are being used now are not the literal off-the-shelf that you find in e-commerce websites. These are specialized drones that are being supplied by China. That is one area where the Chinese have an edge over India in the realm of revolution of military warfare, military affairs. If you see where the drone systems of China has gone, they know that they have a deficiency when it comes to cold start capability of China in the Himalayan regions. But when it comes to the drones, one of the things that PMO actually said to the armed forces is to prepare for non-contact warfare. They have introduced the J-16D, which is for electronic warfare. I'm not saying India doesn't have it. I'm sure India has it. But the Chinese are actually talking about the fifth generation warfare, talking about, you see two new drones that they have deployed, actually shown in the recent air show. One is WZ-7, the second is CH-6. WZ-7 is a complete replica of Global Hawk of United States. They have stolen the technology, literally. So they didn't need a Pakistan for that, but it is happening. Second is the CH-6, which is a revolutionary design. This is where one of the major challenges for the Indian Air Force is to make sure that the project Cheetah actually goes, is in commission very soon, which is about arming our Huron drones with ability to actually not just be surveillance drones, but to actually have offensive capability. And I think it is very important. The government has done a lot of things in terms of Atmanirbhar Bharat. One area where I would request, and I would rather be very happy if the Air Force takes an initiative, is to allow the private-public partnership in the realm of making long-endurance drones in India. We still don't have something worth talking about when it comes to the Rustam. That is where the warfare is going to go. It is going towards unmanned combat vehicles. India is doing a lot of things, I am not denying. But it has to be at the pace at which, yes.
It's what the chief has said today as well. He was asked a question on squadron strength, the depleting squadron strength of the Indian Air Force, and the question that gets asked to every air chief at every annual press conference is this: what is the status of our squadron strength? By when do you think it can go up to 42? We've got a response for that as well from the air chief. Ankur, if we could play the air chief's response, and then we could go to ABM Bahadur.
हासिल हो सकते हैं ये कहना बड़ा मुश्किल है। मैं इतना कहूँगा कि अगले 10-15 साल में तो नहीं हो पाएगा। 83 LCA, 4 स्क्वाड्रन LCA Mark 1A, लगभग 6 स्क्वाड्रन चाहिए, 7 स्क्वाड्रन एमका और 6 स्क्वाड्रन MRFA अगर जोड़ेंगे, और जितने फेज आउट होने वाले हैं 4 स्क्वाड्रन MiG-21, जैगुआर्स, MiG-29, तो हमारी गिनती लगभग 35 के आसपास रहेगी अगले दशक तक।
ABM Bahadur, so that's not exactly a rosy picture there that the air chief paints. But the fact is that it's not just with conventional assets that future wars will be fought. Pratikrit very rightly pointing out that unmanned aerial vehicles, manned aerial vehicles, etc., all will go into fighting a hybrid war. What do you make of the air chief's statement? And is the Indian Air Force right now prepared for a two-front war? The question was asked, the air chief says he is prepared, but the fact is we are low on our squadron strength, and that has been a constant worry for India.
Yeah, I'll come to that, Shreya, but your previous question to Pratikrit regarding the transfer of know-how and expertise. Actually, that is a very valid, not worry, but something that we are aware of, because with the Shaheen exercises of Pakistan Air Force and the PLAF, and for the first time last year, I think they got the PLA Navy aviation, naval aviation also included. That's where the Pakistanis are transferring technology and tactics, Western tactics, to the Chinese. The Chinese know that while they improve their their hardware, it is the capability of fighting. They had a Soviet ethos of fighting, which was centrally controlled. The Western is decentralized to the pilot, to the formation leader. This they have to get out. It's a generational change for them. And the only way they can learn from is basically through the Pakistanis, through these exercises. So the Pakistanis are transferring the tactics, the fighter tactics, the strike tactics, the electronic warfare tactics to the Chinese in these forms, in the relations that they have, and through the exercises that they do. That's the major thrust that we have to watch out for. There are YouTube videos where we've seen Pakistani Air Force people fluent in Mandarin instructing Chinese pilots. That's what the story is. The Chinese pilot in a few years from now will no longer replicate a Soviet pilot or a Russian pilot of the yesteryears. We have to be aware that they have overhauled their training. It is something that we must be aware of, and we are aware of. Now to your question of conventional and unconventional. And the squadron strength. The squadron strength, the chief is right. I mean, it's just a question of mathematics. Even now, HAL is not able to produce 8 aircraft, 8 Tejas per year. The order for 83 has just been placed. So even if they get it to 16, which they are supposed to get per year, it will take us at least 10 years for those 83 to come. Where are the parallel lines for Tejas Mark II to come up? The Mark 1A as a system, incidentally, is going to fly next year. Tejas Mark 1A has the prototype with all the 4 improvements and other things that's not yet flown. So if anybody has to pull up its socks, it is HAL. And they have to get parallel lines going in the private sector so that their production and the inflow into the Air Force increases. And the chief has laid out that the mix will go off the 4 squadrons. And very soon the MiG-29s, the Jaguars, the Mirages will start going off. So the Air Force has placed all its eggs in the HAL basket, and HAL had better deliver. There are no two ways about it. And the government must turn the screws on and demand accountability from HAL and our production agencies and get into the private sector, get the private players going. And that is why that C295 contract, which is the Avro replacement, is a very good step, because now you have aircraft. Yes, it's albeit a transport aircraft, but that line coming up. And we must get lines like this parallelly going, including for helicopters. LUH from HAL, fine. But how many per year? How long will it take? These are the issues. So the chief saying 35 in the next decade is correct. And it is very nice that he has spoken the truth, because the government must know the truth. I think obviously the government knows the truth. Okay. But the point is that this is
India should know the truth as well.
Yeah, this is the reality, and which is right. And hence, whatever is required to be done must be done to get the inflows going. You can't stand with a bag of money and say give us aircraft, because it takes time. So with this and the two-front war, yes, the Air Force has exercised this predicament, if I can use the word, that it could be a two-front war. Plans are in place, and your viewers can be happy and rest assured that with this 35 squadrons, which the Air Force has right now, how to fight it, which way to fight, is well known to the Air Force brass, and plans are in place to face that threat.
Pratikrit, we've already spoken for 17 minutes. This was supposed to be a 15-minute chat, but I do want to speak to you about the lessons we should be drawing from what's happening in Taiwan right now. The story is playing out today about Chinese aggression.
Well, the first thing, I just want to make one small thing. The only silver lining is that in terms of generational shift of technology, one Rafale squadron will be at par with 3 to 4 squadrons of MiG-21. So even if it is 35, we are not completely in a bad situation, but in a war, attrition, keeping in mind the attrition aspect, we have to increase squadron strength, no doubt. So what is happening in Taiwan is a shape of things to come. That is a harbinger of what the Chinese are trying to do, may do, because if you see India as a country with a $3 trillion economy aspiring to be a $5 trillion economy in the next half a decade or a little more, it's a zero-sum game in globalization. Your growth will only come at somebody's cost. So China will keep on creating problems. And the problem will not just be a war, but they will keep up the psychological pressure. How do they keep up the psychological pressure? With these kind of transgressions. 56 aircrafts went into Taiwan air defense identification zone yesterday. Not exactly a national airspace, but still, this is a challenge, and that is what they will try to do. How do we cope up with in terms of resilience? We have shown last year that we are not going to bog down. That's what the Chinese had thought, that in 2 months' time that the Indians will psychologically get bogged down and accept what the Chinese will say. So this is where we have to be patient. The people will have to be patient with the government and the armed forces, that it's a long drawn war. It's not going to be a T20 match. Second, it's not just about what HAL does or what DRDO does, but you have to do it at a pace at which the Chinese are doing. In terms of revolution of military affairs, quantum computing, robotics, next generation warfare, non-contact warfare, unmanned combat aircrafts. HAL is great in technology demonstration. When it comes to production, whether it is HAL or the Ordnance Factory Board, when it comes to the metallurgy, there are challenges. Bring the private sector, create a second production line, and the government, I would accept, they have done a lot. But again, it's not just what you do. It is about how fast you're doing to match up with what the Chinese are doing. And let's understand, China is not a country where the armed forces over there go to sleep very smoothly at night. They have their own problems also. We have to identify it, and we have to make sure that this is not going to be peaceful at all. As we aspire to grow, we are in an environment which is completely volatile, and the volatility, we have to live with it. We can't expect one day will come when everything will become serene. So investment in armed forces, investment, and let me tell you one thing, Shreya, last point. What happened in terms of the drug hauls that are being done by NCB and or the customs, there's a lot of correlation. between the drone attacks by Pakistan, the terrorism that is happening, and who is funding the terrorism through consumption of drugs. So the internal fight against terrorism has a key role to play as part of the overall security of the country. I think overall integration is very important. Western Theatre Command, they have already created these theatre commands. We have to go ahead. We have to make sure that our armed forces also, they are very great, no doubt about that. They have to have an integrated approach now. Shreya.
Today, AVM Bahadur, I know you wanted to come in, but the Air Chief was also asked about the Air Force's hesitation as far as theatre commands are concerned. And the concerns of the Air Force, it seems, remain. He's saying that, well, they have been taken into account, talks are currently underway. But the fact is that the Air Force remains concerned with theatre commands. But anyhow, you wanted to make a quick point, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, this is regarding, as lest people feel, this is vis-a-vis flowing out from what I think we just said about one Rafale being equal to 4 times MiG or something. Numbers have their own weight, and there is a certain amount of numbers which are mandatory. You can get the best of aircraft with 10 times the capability, but if you are required to position aircraft at 10 different places, you require 10 aircraft, or maybe 9, but certainly not 2. So numbers have their own requirement, and many a times people fail to understand that a MiG-21 and a Rafale, what a big difference there is. Yes, I understand. We all understand that the capacity and the capability, but the fact remains you require numbers at different places. Number has its own.
So I only said a short silver lining in the short run. That's it. In the long run, no doubt we need more numbers. That's it.
Yeah, and
I agree.
And the point that you were saying, Shreya, was on the theatre command.
About theatre command.
About theatre command. So I think the chief said that we are all for it, but there are certain issues, or whatever. We should not.
Control. That the Air Force doesn't want to let go control.
No, the point at issue is, when you have a change like this, you are shaking the basic foundation of the armed forces. When you're getting into theatre commands from something that we have now, you're shaking the foundation. We've got to get it right. It cannot be wrong. It has to be a wholesome plan. Everybody quotes China. Remember, when China brought out its plan, it didn't say we will create Western Theatre Command, and we will think about the rest later. No, they came out with a wholesome plan. They possibly war-gamed it to see how it would work. There would have been issues. So we cannot say, let's start with Air Defense Command, baki aa jayega. It doesn't flow that way. So whatever we have decided, whatever the government and it should be a wholesome package, thought through, war-gamed, because we can't make a mistake.
Okay. We'll leave it there for the moment. AVM Manmohan Bahadur, thank you very much for joining us on this chat. Pratikit, always good to have you on the show here. Thank you very much. And on the point of MiG-21s, since both of you have spoken about it, so they will finally retire, says the Air Chief, in the next 2 to 3 years, or did he say 3 to 4 years? So they should be completely out.
Depends on HAL, Shreya. Depends on HAL completely.
Well, he was very confident today. He said, 3-4 saal, it will be done. They'll be out. We'll be bidding goodbye to the MiG-21s. And the question that was asked was in context of course, them being accident prone. So he's saying, their track record is bad. Since the 2000s, if you see, the safety record is actually better. But, well, it does carry a reputation. We'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much, Pratikrit. Good to have you, AVM Manmohan Bahadur, on the show. Thank you very much. Good to speak to you.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you.